At this stage, what we would like is to offer the opportunities to our panelists to ask to one another any specific clarification or questioning of the thoughts that they have put forward. So maybe, Michael, if you have any questions for the other two panelists or any observation about what they have said, we'll be glad to hear that.
Both of my distinguished colleagues talked about professional development and the professional associations and capacity building, and certainly one of the resource issues there is the relationship between the better resourced and longer established evaluation associations, the Canadian Evaluation Society, the American, the Australasian, the European, and the many, some now 70 national evaluation associations around the world and ideas. And I wonder, I would like to invite you to comment more directly and perhaps provocatively and challengingly about what you think the longer standing, better resourced evaluation associations ought to actually be doing with the associations in developing countries to support their development.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think what I tried to draw attention to is that the evaluation profession needs to retain credibility and across the board. So I want to say that in this regard, those older, longer-lasting institutions, better resourced, have an obligation in the interest of the profession to make sure that these burgeoning institutions in countries such as mine would be supported. I alluded to a sort of common language which is emerging. There are issues of ethics. If evaluation is to attain professional status the same as, say, an institute for engineers, and so on. So again, to say that the weaker will be supported by the stronger, and that the lessons of what has made these older institutions abiding would be transferred to the younger ones so that they do not have to reinvent the wheel. This links also to the issue of competencies. Who is an evaluator? I mean, this has to be confronted. I've heard it said that maybe where we should push is to have a sort of certification arrangement. So that at least we will not get anybody calling themselves an evaluator who is not an evaluator, and therefore bringing the whole profession into disrepute. And these risks are there. In my country, Ghana, I have seen many reports which have been jettisoned. I mean, they're not relevant to anything. They're going through the motions and so on. I've seen it with UNDP, the evaluation office. A lot of reports which are, they are so irrelevant to emerging issues. And I think this is important. Since I have the floor, let me just also push you a little bit on this complexity issue which you put on the table. The fact that we should not have tunnel vision, the fact that we should not make assumptions which can be undermined by evolving situations. As you were talking, I thought you wanted us all to be sort of prophets, because the way I see the dynamics in the global environment, the imponderables are more than the certainties. At least sitting in Africa, that's what we see. And we're completely not in control. External forces, external shocks, they come at us. and undermine our plans, and we don't know what to do. So maybe you have some answers for us.
I'm sure you do.
Well, I think part of the implication of that is the complexity framing, is the way in which the timelines for evaluation are shortening, the need for real-time feedback and short timelines, the important work that Ray has done around looking at streams of information instead of these big one-off evaluation reports that tend to be very static and have long timelines, and as you said, by the time even the report gets out, it's outdated. That the future is being able to adapt not only programs and interventions, but evaluation data collection systems to inform things under rapid change, and the capacity to deal quickly, keep things up to date, be flexible, means that in these imponderables, as you so nicely put it, I find that historically, one of the impediments to flexibility is evaluators. And the evaluation modeling that has created a static notion that 3 to 5 years in advance, a program can select targets and indicators, and that the job then is to hold them accountable some years later to meet those targets and indicators, regardless of whether H1N1 appears, HIV/AIDS, the global financial system collapses. They're simply still held accountable for these things that people pulled out of the air in the first place. It's not like they were based on anything. So the whole notion of streams of information, updating, flexible, adapting, negotiating, the independence piece of this is making sure that those adaptations are rigorous and based upon data, that people aren't just making excuses and acting willy-nilly, that in fact their adjustments and adaptations are based upon evidence about what's happening. And that's where we can bring rigor to this. Our rigor has been static and holding people accountable for static outcomes rather than being able to engage them with credibility, with competence, as you've suggested, but in a world of very different dynamics where things are going to change rapidly, and we have to be part of the change.
Thank you. Mr. Naidoo, would you have any suggestions or comments or observations to any of the other two panelists?
Yes. Just on the point about how can the more established evaluation communities help the less established ones. I think a lot of that has already happened. It's happened in the form of the persons from countries where it's not been established participating in international events. It's happened in the form of training where persons have come in and actually helped to train people. But I think where it has not been that visible is that there's a tendency for persons and evaluators in the developing countries not to write. They don't publish. It's an oral tradition. They talk about things. So there's an assumption they don't do anything because the real world is about writing. Give me the paper, show it to me. But if you were to, for example, have attended the 3rd African Evaluation Conference in Cape Town, Ray, in 2004, vibrant evaluation was evident. And at the end, we had a resolution, let's have an African Journal of Evaluation. 6 years later, we haven't hit that. No one has written, but I know it's happening because when you go there, people will tell you about it. So, and a lot of the world is defined by what's on paper. And unless you get a point where I think there's got to be some openness from the more established journals to maybe, I won't say drop the standards, but to establish criteria which allows for persons to publish in a way that's acceptable, and perhaps joint evaluation at the start, a joint publication, so that you can get into the sort of mainstream. Because it doesn't mean it's not happening, it just means that it's not codified, it's not written. And it's got to do with the sort of part, it's too strenuous, to get to that. The one other point that was made in terms of the capacity building, and I've mentioned this last year and I think the year before, IPTED is excellent. I have a staff member sitting here and being trained, and I know what's her assignment when we get back. But it's important that the problem we face is a funding problem, and it'll be great if you could have a program like this in the region so that you can get more participants and to help with the community. So it's something that really, I know there has been discussions, which should go in. I also feel that something should not be so localized that you become parochial. It's important that evaluators to be part of a broader international community. And let's not, as I said, as you mentioned, let's not romanticize local. We all know a lot of the participatory evaluation doesn't move at all. because everyone is still discussing about the agenda and how do we go about it and negotiating, etc. So that there is that tension, and we need to straddle it. But I think the points were well taken. The negotiating complexity is something we do all the time. We just discovered quite brutally that something that we were measuring and thought we were measuring well for the last 10 years in government departments, we were measuring the wrong thing. Because the departments had managed to work around the question paper. And they were getting great scores until we went to Parliament and they said, but our experience is, whilst you've given this department, Toko Masango, who did the department, knows, whilst you gave them 76%, there are no houses in the country. How do you go and do that? And we said, no, we're measuring their governance. But they said, but governance, you can measure all you want, but there's no how. We talk to the people. And we went back and we're now rethinking the whole indicator, because our indicator was, as you said, limited. So it's important to push your work out for critique. Otherwise, you really believe that you're really important and can be quite irrelevant.
Any other observations?
No, very interesting, Indian point you've made after 10 years. And many people should be asked to return their salaries if they've been misleading the government for 10 years. But having said that, there are many people, policymakers, who really don't want to know the truth. The truth hurts, and they want to be told only the nice stories. So I don't know, but evaluators can be the enemies of the people. That's how the politicians will put it. Many times now, since the evaluation function is being put at a higher platform, ministers feel that the performance is going to be tested by evaluators, and then they feel that they might even lose their jobs if the truth is known about certain things. I'm sure there are many people in this room who have had that experience. You find that they won't talk to you, or they won't cooperate, and so on. So part of the reason I'm saying this is for the training to also be aware of this and really give the skills to participants to be able to navigate, as you said, the political space. It's so important, and to be able to get cooperation rather than people seeing them as auditors who are going to give them bad marks and things like that. I mean, trying to create a track which will make them believe that everybody is in it for the good of the country and so on. But it takes certain skills, because I have seen very, very arrogant evaluators in my time. I'm extremely, because they come with a certain set idea and as if they want to cut you out, if you know what I mean. So that people then cover up, instead of letting you know what the true situation is, they hiding things from you and so on. These interpersonal skills would need to be incorporated into IPDET programs. That's what I'm trying to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Quinpatan, you've been actually speaking to a group, an audience, who's been actually trained and earned a living by having to predict the future and trying to have hypotheses. I wonder, what do you suggest are some alternative skills that one needs in order to actually be in a better position to perform evaluations in such a complex world?
Well, I return again to the increased speed with which we're generating data and needing to adapt in real time. And part of it is an acknowledgement of the uncertainties that are there and the capacity to actually see things as they emerge that we haven't even imagined might be there. That involves field work and watching where innovations are occurring and new possibilities are emerging. But it means that one of the challenges in funding evaluations and in conducting them and my class has heard my rant about this, but you'll get the short version of it, is that my guess is that 80 to 90% of all evaluation is still done on a predetermined, routinized schedule of midterm and end-of-project evaluation that has no relationship to the actual dynamics of programs, to the emergence of events, to what goes on. That makes it easy to administer evaluation. It makes it easy to contract evaluation. It makes it easy to manage evaluation, and it assures that evaluation is out of sync with what's really going on, because programs don't have things just happen at midterm and at the end. And the evaluators, when those schedules are set up, the whole way in which international and much national evaluation is done is based upon this predetermined notion that those are the key times to catch things, rather than an analysis of what are the decision-making dynamics of a particular organization. When do they do budgeting? When do they do planning? When do the staff have their annual retreats where they look at the past and the future? And how do we get the evaluation in sync with that? You know, both of my colleagues here talked about the issue of timeliness. We have scheduled evaluation in ways that almost assure that they're not timely. End-of-project evaluations, for example, are guaranteed to be done after all the decisions have been made about the future of a project, because decisions aren't made at the end of the project. They have to be made a year in advance, which means the midterm evaluation is the closest there's going to be to a summative evaluation, and it's not designed to do that. So we've got all of these things that are out of sync that are done by administrative ease and habit, and what appeared on the face of it in history. You know, there's a sort of logic to doing midterm and end of project unless you examine what are the actual dynamics of how decisions get taken, how organizations function, and can we engage in more flexible, real-time evaluation feedback along the lines of Ray's work on streams that adds to the streams notion attention to the decision-making dynamics of organizations so that the data are there when the decisions get taken. It won't be perfect data, it won't be completed data, it won't be nice polished reports, but it will be real-time data. And we haven't been really setting ourselves up to do that. The research and the accountability focus has kept us from being flexible and dynamic, and I think the future is going to be more adapting ourselves to the realities of how things work.
Thank you very much to all of three panelists.